Back in our BTN Live coverage from Chicago, Penn State begins life without Christian Hackenberg, their all-time passing touchdowns leader, on to the NFL. Replacing him will be one of the big question marks for this team this year. Whoever takes over has a really talented group of players offensively around him, including Saquon Barkley, over 1,000 yards as a freshman last year. You see Chris Godwin there, most returning receiving yards of any player in the Big Ten. And the defense will have to rebuild just a little bit. They were third in the nation in sacks. They lose 3 out of the front 4 to the NFL. So some question marks there. New defensive coordinator as well in Brent Pry. But a lot to build on in State College, including 9 starters back on offense. We mentioned Barkley, who is outstanding. New offensive coordinator as well, and Joe Moorhead. So will definitely be a different feel for this team on both sides of the ball. Very pleased now to be joined by the head coach of the Nittany Lions, James Franklin. And James, let's start with the coordinator changes. And I'm interested in offense first because it seems like it really is a philosophical change. You went outside of the staff to bring in Joe Moorhead. So give us a sense of what appealed to you about Joe and what we can expect from Penn State offensively.
I've been following Joe for a long time. I got a chance to see Joe at a Nike football clinic in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Was impressed with him, kind of put him on my list at that point, started following him. He was the head coach at Fordham, had a contract through 2023, had a bunch of success. There's some coordinators and coaches that may have a good year, but he was able to do it multiple years, scoring, rushing, passing, multiple ways of doing it. So I was impressed. The other thing is it takes some of the stress off the offensive line. I'm a big believer in the pro-style offense ever since my time with the Green Bay Packers, but that is an offense that is really dependent on your offensive line. You got to be great up front to be successful, offense, defense, in whatever scheme you're going to run. But when you're running a pro-style offense and you're going to power running game, you're going to play action pass, you're going to drop back, you better be good up front. And we had 9 scholarship offensive linemen when I got the job. We're finally at 17, but we're still young. You talked about nine returning starters on offense. We only got 1 senior, so we're still kind of out of whack from that standpoint. But I think Joe's going to enable us with tempo. He's a West Coast background, so our passing concepts are still very similar. We're still running inside zone and outside zone. It's not like he's coming in and recreate the wheel. Everybody's running the same plays, but it's how he's going to package those plays together that I think is going to be most successful.
So how difficult is it making that turn from an installation, learning, and personnel area? How difficult is the turn?
I think personnel, it's not. That's why I made the decision. I think our personnel matches what we're trying to do, especially when it comes to the offensive line, what we're talking about. They're going to get less complex looks. They're not going to get as many of those extravagant looks that we're going to get on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's going to help us. To be honest with you, for the biggest challenge is the verbiage, and really for me. I've been in the same system really since I was with the Green Bay Packers. Same verbiage, all those types of things. For the rest of our coaches, for our players, they've only been in the system for a year or 2 or 3 years at the most anyway, so it's the language. But Joe's one of those guys, which I think is, as you know, Coach, is how do you take a system that may be complex and how do you make it simple to the players so they can adjust to it and have a chance to play and play fast?
You mentioned the offensive line. How do you assess their improvement in spring?
Much better. We just have competition and we have depth. And we went from having a 1 deep my first year to my last year, having a 2 deep, but the 2 deep were guys that we were hoping to redshirt. Now we have a true 2 deep where now they're redshirt freshmen into 2 deep that are competing. We've got competition at every single position on our team, which we haven't had. We went from having 5 300-pounders in our program when I got the job to now having 12. A young man by the name of Noah Bay, who when I got the job was committed as an offensive tackle at 242 pounds. He's now 300 pounds and competing for a starting job.
What does that allow you to do from the quarterback position? Will you name a starter early? How will that happen? McSorley, will he be the guy? Trace had a gap. He had a gap during spring ball over Tommy Stevens. But I don't know if that's necessarily fair because Trace had been our backup quarterback for 2 years. Even Trace's freshman year, if Christian Hackenberg would have got hurt, we would have burned his red shirt and played him. So he's been preparing as the backup for 2 years now.
Tommy really did some nice things in the spring. We wanted to give him every opportunity to close that gap if he could, or allow Trace to keep the gap. So we'll go into spring ball. The thing that I also think is going to help our offensive line is the mobility that we have at that position now. Both of those guys can make plays with their feet, and maybe hide some of the issues that we're still trying to overcome.
Reva mentioned the defensive line and some of the losses, significant losses
Yes.
in the defensive line. How's that group coming?
That's our biggest challenge. I mean, when we got here, it was clearly obvious, as you guys saw when you come out to camp, defensive line was the strength. We had depth, we had talent. You can build a defense around that. That's our challenge. Feel great about our linebackers with Kabinda and Naeem Wortman and Brandon Bell. I think those three are as good as any three in the conference. Feel great about our secondary. Everybody returning in the secondary that's going to have a chance to make an impact for us. We have to solve our problem up front. Feel good about D-end. We've had a number of guys that have played significant reps for us in Sickles and Schwann and Torrance Brown. D-tackle is the area we're going to need guys to step up. Parker Cothran's played a lot of football for us, but we're going to have to get great play from our defensive line like we've had the last couple of years.
Coach, you mentioned from the podium now having to change the practice schedule because you have more bodies. Yeah. How does that actually work? I mean, is it just more reps? Is it what do you actually do when you change that script?
Well, it's a number of things. It's, in the past, we cut reps out of practice because we just could not afford to wear down the guys that we had. It was also the amount of time that we were out at practice. It was also the tempo. We did a lot more walk-throughs and jog-throughs than full speed because the wear and tear of the players that we had. So we're adding more time. We're adding more reps per practice. Part of that is the tempo that we're going to be doing on offense, but part of that is just overall reps. And then the other thing is how competitive practice will be. I want more competitive periods with the offense versus the defense, which we limited over the last 2 years.
To build on Howard's question, your numbers are obviously better than they've been since you've been there. Your recruiting is going well, but it looks like it's going to be a small class.
Yes.
How do you change the recruiting process with such a small class?
You just have to be patient. It's completely different than our first 2 years. Our first 2 years, we were around 17 commitments by this point. We just got a couple commitments the past week and a half, but we're just patient. We know that there's guys that we want to be involved in later in the recruiting process. I know our season is going to have a big impact on that. There's some guys that I think we could get right now, but we've identified guys that we think are going to be really good shape on, and we don't have the pressure of feeling we have to sign 25 guys because we don't have that many scholarships available. That goes back to, like I said, we only have one senior on offense and only a handful on defense.
Coach, talk a little bit about your upgrades to the facility and the academic building. Where is that right now?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think you guys have been to Penn State for years. When I said this 2 years ago, people were like in shock that I was talking about Penn State's facilities because our stadium is obviously impressive. Our weight room is obviously impressive. The size and the scope of our facilities is unreal, but they've just become a little dated. And I'm talking about carpet, I'm talking about graphics, I'm talking about technology. A few years ago, when Bill O'Brien took over the job, they were still on VHS tape. So it just shows you how far behind we were there. So we've just finished our locker room. Our players haven't seen it yet. They're going to see it when they arrive back for camp, it's phenomenal. I can't wait for you guys to see it. We just got new turf in our indoor facility, which is really going to be helpful for us as well because we spend a lot of time in there. But we're just kind of pecking away at these things so that we can identify and tell the great Penn State story we have in a way that these 2015, 16, and 17 recruits relate to.
Coach, talk about a big-time recruit for you last year, and I will vividly remember this. You have those moments where you kind of, as us, when we're at camp, we discover a guy. Obviously, you've known about him for ages. But, Howard, do you remember when Saquon Barkley took that pitch and turned the corner and went down the sideline in front of the two of us last year, and we just kind of turned to each other and went,
he's special.
Whoa.
Well, I'll tell you what, then let me know, because if you guys ever want to get into scouting, you guys have an unbelievable eye
really
for
have an eye for talent.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to miss.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
I mean, he is really something special, and we saw it last year. I mean, he goes over 1,000 yards as a freshman. You have so much skill on this team. I mean, between him at running back, I know you got an incoming freshman who you're sky high on, and then the receivers are fantastic. So whoever gets plugged in at quarterback, man, there's a lot of skill position talent,
It's an
James.
ideal situation. I mean, I think myself, just like every coach, would love to have an experienced quarterback returning for the next 20 years. Doesn't happen like that. But if you're going to be in that situation, you'd love for a quarterback coming in behind an experienced offensive line with experienced wide receivers and at the running back position as well. The fact that you got Saquon Barkley, we have a lot of confidence in Mark Allen. We have a lot of confidence in Andre Robinson, who is a highly recruited guy as well. And then we go out and sign Miles Sanders, the number one running back according to scouting services in the country. That's the type of competition and depth that you want. At receiver, you got Chris Godwin, had over 1,000 yards receiving this year. The year before, Deshaun Hamilton led the Big Ten in receptions. So it's an ideal situation. Mike Gesicki at tight end, who I think is coming into his own. So if you had to choose a situation for a new quarterback, this is the situation.
Matt Limegrover taking over as the offensive line coach, someone who we know quite well and have a ton of respect for. What have you seen from him at what has been, and we've already addressed it to a certain extent, what has been a problem area for this program? What has he brought?
Well, I think whenever you can go out and hire a head coach to come in and be your coordinator, you're bringing value. Whenever you can go out and hire two coordinators in Tim Banks and Matt Limegrover to come in and be position coaches, they're a great sounding board for our coordinators. They're a great sounding board for me. They understand the big picture. They see the big picture. Matt is, as you guys know, is as good as it gets. And not just as a coach, but as a person. You'd never know the guy had been a coordinator for Coach Kill for 16 years and a coordinator in Big Ten for 5 years. Just so humble, so appreciative. It also helps that they're both Pennsylvania guys. Matt Limegrover's a Pennsylvania guy. Joe Moorhead's a Pennsylvania guy. They both went to Pittsburgh Central Catholic together, same high school. So it's a great situation. But I think Matt's really going to help us. He's a teacher. And again, he's showing up to Penn State at the right time. I heard he did an interview the other day. He's like, I'm glad I'm showing up now, not when there was 9 scholarship offensive line.
Right. Timing's everything in life. We know that, James. James Franklin, head coach of the Nittany Lions. Thanks a lot for your time. Really appreciate it.